It was assault.
Yeah.
You physically overpowered me, and if there were any justice, you would be in jail right now.
Okay, so...
But my career, after so many failed attempts, is finally starting to take off. I am getting offers and fan mail, and all that goes away if I'm just the girl who got choked by Bojack Horseman.
I can't lie about this.
I don't want you to be the most notable thing that ever happened to me. I don't want you to be the question I get asked in interviews for the rest of my life.
Gina,
You need to do this for me, okay? Because I just want this to be over.
So here's the thing about Gina Cazador in Bojack Horseman. She has to be one of the most tragic characters in the series, but not due to how the show handled her, as, if you are unaware, she does get a happy ending and ends up starring as Fireflame in Kelsey Jennings' big lesbian superhero drama.
Also in my version, she's gay. Okay, bye!
Presumably destined to be a success. The tragedy of her character comes from how the fan base looks at her and remembers her. To give credit where it's due, I hadn't really considered this until a comment on my post about your favorite side characters really opened my eyes to the main thing Bojack is left with when they last interact. Her resistance to being treated like a victim. So I wanted to make a video that dives into why she might not have wanted to be referred to as one, and why we still think of her as one when we reflect on this series as a whole. Why didn't Gina want justice? Many people find this decision confusing, but it's worth recognizing that about half of the victims of domestic abuse don't report it to the authorities or want it publicized at all. Well, the first part about this particular incident, it's not a normal situation. They're famous people, and it's likely that Bojack would never suffer real justice due to his money and influence, and that they would inevitably become a national debating point after it becomes public information. It's just how this country works, sadly. We saw it with Hank Hippopopoulos pretty explicitly.
You can't. You stupid, ugly can't.
Yeah, that doesn't say can't.
Oh.
Unfortunately, as much as there would be takedowns of Bojack and his behavior across the years, there would also be a rising movement of defense for him, and in particular, hate against Gina for accusing him in the first place, even though, you know, we as an audience know that she is absolutely telling the truth, or would be. It's extremely common for those who publicly out their accusers to face ridicule, shaming, and even sometimes death threats, as many people are incapable of empathizing with the actual people involved in these conflicts. Yes, they are real people, and would rather instead equate it to a political ideology to further their own agenda, like this is only happening because of the male loneliness epidemic. I think it's more that the male loneliness epidemic is happening because of behavior like this. So, let's not blame the victims, ever, please. Like, it is seriously deranged. But there's also a more emotional part to this resistance, speaking to how Gina perceives herself as well. If she becomes a victim, speaks up, this will become permanently attached to her public footprint, potentially meaning she would have to repeatedly face and speak about this event over and over again if she ever wished to return to the public eye. Again, it's just how pop culture news operates. Everyone feasts on a scandal. I'm sure Hollywood would jump on a documentary about the dark side of Bojack. I mean, we see hundreds of those coming out in real life these days, and publicize her tragedy even further for the sake of monetary gain, regardless of how she actually felt about it. And, you know, possibly misrepresent things, because they're also very common at that. After a traumatic experience, those who were affected can have physical reactions to reminders about the traumatic event, such as shortness of breath, or raised blood pressure, or even a full-on fever. And over time, these reactions can become less and less prevalent, and many people learn how to deal with and effectively control them, of course. That is a part of healing. But it can be very difficult at first to face any sort of reminder of the assault, and can cause feelings of intense anxiety or panic even. And the possibility of having all of this in the public eye for the next few years and potentially for the rest of her entire career is extremely daunting and honestly terrifying as a concept to her, because immediately afterward, every reminder of that situation is utterly painful for her to experience. The interview with Biscuits and Bojack immediately following her assault is one of the most uncomfortable scenes in the show for me. Watching Gina be forced to relive this entire awful situation and pretend to put on a happy face on the whole thing is uniquely disturbing, and I think Stephanie Beatrice, and Will Arnett for that matter, do an excellent job at portraying the intense anxiety hidden behind this scene for Gina, who is likely terrified of being in the same room as Bojack by this point, and who fake chokes him in the middle of the interview. In her mind, she needs to face Bojack this one last time to be able to move on and not have this attached to her record. Not that it makes it any easier, because that way, she will be able to avoid this horrid experience down the road in her career. She won't have to relive it every day, every interview, every article about her. She would be able to theoretically move on, or at least she hopes. I would also like to say that the victim label carries a really heavy connotation for a lot of people, especially those who have gone through these kind of traumatic experiences, and can often lead them to feeling as their identity is defined by these traumatic things that have happened to them. And that often links them to feeling as if they are consistently helpless in the face of the world around them, which is an utterly terrifying feeling to confront. I mean, specifically victims of intense acts of violence have to kind of confront the nature of malevolence. There are those who, in some states, want to hurt or even kill others. While we're raised, we often carry certain worldviews and assumptions. One of those being that the universe is fair, actions have meaning, and that goodness and light will eventually always win in the end, and that is also supported by a lot of media out there. But after abuse like this, those perceptions are directly contradicted, and it can leave the victims feeling as if the world has been deprived of its meaning, or that they have lost their control over their own lives as a whole, and that their choices don't exactly matter and cannot save them or improve their lives. She states plainly that Bojack completely overpowered her, and for that time she completely lost control of her life and was at Bojack's whim, though not able to rationally speak with him, which is an experience so terrifying I struggle to put it into words as I haven't experienced it myself, but it is utterly, utterly horrific, and can instill a feeling of total helplessness in the survivor of those events. So one way to retain control is how the world sees her, her image, her career. She can move forward and become this extremely famous and successful actress without this holding her back, prove to herself that she can control her life and that she isn't helpless in this universe, especially since earlier that season she had really felt a severe loss with the whole singing audition for Filbert and had nearly given up on her dreams. So now that her career is actually doing well, she can feel a level of control that she never previously had, and one that she now needs more than ever. It really depends on person to person whether or not the term victim bothers them in this case. A lot of people prefer the term survivor, mostly because of the traits that encompass a victim. It makes them feel as if they are labeled and put in a box within this helpless, weak, emotional personality that comes with being called a victim. And I think Gina, in a way, is definitely trying to avoid that as well. So why do people in the audience still see her and treat her only as a victim, even though she has expressed pretty vehemently that she does not want to be one? I mean, the short, simple answer would be that this show is from Bojack's perspective. It isn't Gina's journey. We get an in-depth depiction of how her adjacency to Bojack has a negative effect on her life, and even get a bit of extra context in the episode, a quick one while he's away, without Bojack in the picture, showing how this assault has affected her emotional state in the year following. We also get a really close-up depiction of her resultant anxiety from the experience on the Filbert set, which is a very common attribute and symptom of PTSD. Once again, all my sources are linked in the description below. But in fact, she very starkly exhibits many of the most common symptoms, where when she is dancing on the set in this new movie, even though the director has stated that they have taken every precaution, she has an overwhelming fear that something terrible might happen to her, because despite the control she has in these situations, she acutely remembers how it feels to lose it and how quickly and unexpectedly it can occur. And so she's rather overbearing from the perspective of her coworkers and begins frustrating them with her demands, not really understanding where those demands are coming from because she's unwilling to discuss or come forward about the situation. I'd also like to mention that a lot of the people that she's working with are men, and the one who assures her that she is in control, that everything is safe, is a man. And she just fundamentally at this point cannot trust that that is true after she had put so much faith in Bojack and had that thrown so fiercely back in her face. But as a result, she exhibits physical symptoms as well, such as motor tension as a result of anxiety, which is why she freezes up and the dance scene leads to her falling, tragically also causing the other actor in the movie to repeat what Gina said to Bojack back to her. A ton of people have recognized this as well and were really worried for what it meant for Gina's character going forward, as it seemed to allude that she could succumb to a similar cycle of self-destruction as Bojack did, stemming from one of Bojack's own actions. However, Healing does not necessarily have to take place during a set period of time, nor is it a linear process, and Gina could very well recognize and work on this behavior and perhaps open up to a therapist if that makes her feel more comfortable. Then would be able to talk to someone in a privileged conversation where it won't be released to the public about this experience so she doesn't have to bottle it up entirely inside. We do get a brief hint at this healing process with Gina's eventual success in earning the role of Fireflame, really only told through a billboard though. But it is despite the warning this other director gave to Kelsey as a result of her behavior on that set. Thus, it's reasonable to assume that she was able to get a handle on these intense emotions, perhaps get help, but learned to deal with them better in the moment to be able to perform more efficiently at her job and be able to have that career that she always wanted. But we do get a very close-up look at how this experience has changed her as a person and the behavior that can result from these traumatic situations. And we don't get too much exposure for Gina's success and eventual recovery, if that. Clearly, as tragic as it is, the latter would be easier for most fans to recall at the top of their head when thinking about this character. I would also add that Gina's assault is one of the most viscerally disturbing scenes in the entire show, and is one we see up close in a way that we don't normally get on Bojack. I mean, Sarah Lynn's death is tragic the more you think about it, with the 17 minutes and Bojack's subsequent cover-up, but this act happens right before our eyes. The complete silence of the moment as Gina struggles adds so much too, as it seemingly goes on forever. It is uniquely disturbing and realistic in a way that sticks with people for quite a long time, definitely including me. I think that's why when Gina is brought up, it's often alongside this scene or event. It's just aggressively memorable, and it's hard not to think about it when you think about Gina, even though she would rather not be associated with it. But there is a very important message for those who are struggling with this sort of perception. You can't always control what other people will think of you or perceive of you, no matter how hard you attempt to retain that control. Gina works so hard to cover this up, and Hollywood will likely never know about it, but those who watch the show are acutely aware of the situation, and thus the image of her as a victim is still present in some people's minds, even if not inside the show's universe, although I'm sure Bojack and everyone who was on set that day very much still views her as one. But it also doesn't mean that she has to view herself as a victim, define herself as one, or let that term hold her back from pursuing her goals in any way. She knows that she has the potential to be extremely successful and that she has genuine talent. And if she can work to acclimate to these reminders of her assault and control her intense fear when she is faced with those reminders, she can become more than this horrible thing that happened to her. She can be just an actress. No addendums, no victim term, just an extremely popular, successful, well-adjusted actress, as we see from the fact that her acting career takes off in full force, starring in this huge blockbuster and hopefully working to fix that slight discussion of her in the industry as difficult due to symptoms resulting from her PTSD. I am thoroughly glad she was able to get everything back in the end, although I do wish we got a clearer picture of her doing so and how she made that journey of recovery, although we do get many examples of recovery in the show. While I would love just more Bojack content, it's not exactly necessary. It doesn't detract, but it does add to this perception as Gina as a victim, even though she desperately didn't want to be. And I think her journey is really important for those who are struggling with the same sort of mentality, where she was able to move past that and eventually abandon that term for herself. It's not something that has to control you. Sure, that event changed her, that event affected her emotionally and caused something that she needed to work through, but it didn't ruin her life. It didn't take hold of her life's path, and she was still able to forge exactly where she intended to from the beginning. And I think that's really beautiful. Anyway, if you enjoyed, consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/PosiTVty to get extra content in the form of unedited essays and all these videos before they come out on here, but the support on YouTube does mean a shit ton, so thank you so much for watching, liking, subscribing, discuss further in the comments because we love talking with you guys, and make sure to recommend other videos that you'd like like us to do. We love taking your recommendations. I've got a bit of a backlog now because people are actually suggesting things. It's so exciting. And I am catching up on new shows even. So if you have anything you want to see, be sure to leave me a comment below. Or I don't know where I'll respond, but I'll likely read it and definitely take it to heart. But I hope you have a beautiful day. Make sure to spread as much positivity as you can in the world. Tell those people that you care about them, and just make sure that you're making the world a better place. It's something that we could all stand to do during these times. During all times, though. I mean, you know, we should never stop just because it isn't hard in society. What am I talking about? End the video, Alex. Bye, guys.